Hello, we are on day 6 of 40 days in God's presence. This is a book by Rebecca Barlow Jordan, and it's really wonderful. We're going to be reading about the Israelites taking a detour in Exodus chapter 13, verse 17 to 18. Now, we're all pretty familiar, if you remember the story, we're all pretty familiar with the fact that the Israelites went around the wilderness for 40 years, and that was because after sending the 12 spies in, 10 of them came back with a negative report, and only Joshua and Caleb had, believed in God that they could go in and slay the giants and take the land. But because of the disobedience of the 10, that whole generation had to die out over 40 years, and only Joshua and Caleb lived to go into the promised land. However, this was before that. Even before that, we're seeing that God had taken them on a detour. And in chapter 13, it says, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the road through Philistine country, though that was shorter. God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. So I'm sure you're familiar with the 10 plagues that ended with the firstborns dying in the whole country, except the Israelites that celebrated the Passover and put the blood of the lambs on the doorposts. And that is a whole study in its own. There's books written about that, so I'm not going to go into it. But they were then told, get out of here. Pharaoh's like, all right, I've had enough. I just want you out of here, and please bless me. He asked for a blessing. That kind of tickled me, made me laugh a little bit. And so the Exodus happened. The Exodus out of Egypt happened 430 years to the day from the time that they had settled in Egypt. The Lord Adonai is the one who set them free. And I just want to say that the direct route led them directly into battle. And that is why God decided to send them on a detour. Just going to say that one more time. The direct route would have led them into battle, directly into battle, but instead God chose a detour for them that was going to help them because they weren't ready for battle. They were not prepared. It does say in one of the verses that they were ready for battle, but when you look up that words, it means that they went out in battle formation. Imagine the thousands of people that were leaving Egypt, and they couldn't have just gone as a horde of people. They needed. So I'm sure you're familiar with the 10 plagues that ended with the firstborns dying in the whole country, except the Israelites that celebrated the Passover and put the blood of the lambs on the doorposts. And that is a whole study in its own. There's books written about that, so I'm not going to go into it. But they were then told, get out of here. Pharaoh's like, all right, I've had enough. I just want you out of here, and please bless me. He asked for a blessing. That kind of tickled me, made me laugh a little bit. And so the Exodus happened. The Exodus out of Egypt happened 430 years to the day from the time that they had settled in Egypt. The Lord Adonai is the one who set them free. And I just want to say that the direct route led them directly into battle. And that is why God decided to send them on a detour. Just going to say that one more time. The direct route would have led them into battle, directly into battle, but instead God chose a detour for them that was going to help them because they weren't ready for battle. They were not prepared. It does say in one of the verses that they were ready for battle, but when you look up that words, it means that they went out in battle formation. Imagine the thousands of people that were leaving Egypt, and they couldn't have just gone as a horde of people. They needed to go orderly, and that was what that word means, that they went in a formation is how they left Egypt and how they, went anywhere that they went. So that is like God is a God of order. So pretty cool to think of that. And what we learn from this detour is that God is good. God is good, and he is a gracious God. And on purpose, in order to protect them, he sent them on this detour. He did not want them, after being in slavery, beat down, not fed well. I mean, just read the story. They went through a lot. I'm sure that they were not in peak physical condition. And he didn't want to take them and set them free and bring them into freedom automatically to put them right into another battle and bondage again. That's not how God is. God is too good for that. He is gracious, and so he had a plan, and that's what the detour was. They could have, it seemed like, sometimes does it seem like, okay, God, I see the plan. I see a direct route where I want to go, and I'm here, I want to be there, and there's the direct route. But I'm sure all of you have seen the meme that goes around social media, and it says, my idea is like from here to there, but how it actually happened is all these squiggles like this. And that is true of life in general. So when we realize that we have a good God, when we realize that surrendering to his plan, and there's tons of scriptures that support this, surrendering to his plan is the best plan, because it is a life of faith. And it actually says in here, living a life of, so this is an Oswald Chambers quote, living a life of faith means never knowing where you're being led, but it does mean loving and knowing the one who is leading. So sometimes when we are doing the Christian life, we don't always think of the fact that we are living a life of faith. And that is, a relationship with God is a life of faith from the beginning to the end. And so never knowing where you are being led is a kind of, seems like an insecure position. However, when we know the one who is leading, then that's all the security that we ever need. It's a very secure place. It's a place of peace. It's a place actually of rest. And so I was enjoying this and thinking about how many times have we looked back after a year, after 5 years, after 10 years, look back and see, oh, that's what God was up to. I didn't understand it then, but I can see now that this crazy trip that I took, this detour that it seems like I took, instead of going directly where I wanted to, actually prepared me for where I am now. And I can absolutely say that. I've seen God prepare me just leaving Louisiana, being in 2 other states, and then coming back to Louisiana at this time. I see how God has used all of that detour, which, was not comfortable at the time. But number one, gave me some really amazing relationships that I am super grateful for, and am so thankful to God for. However, more than that, I also know that it prepared me for where he has me right now. And so the other thing is, that I forgot to mention, not only did God take them on a detour, but he also had a dual purpose for something else. They ended up going back to a town, and it's too much of a tongue twister to say, but they went back to another town, and God said, have them backtrack a little bit and stay here. And it was almost like a retreat. Like okay, there's two understandings of retreat. So if you're in battle and you retreat, you're going back, like you're losing the battle, is a retreat. But there's also the retreat that we do to set ourselves aside for quiet time with the Lord, which I'm so excited because I have a retreat coming up in less than 2 months. And that's going to be so exciting. So I'm planning for that. So that's a retreat purposefully set aside to quiet all the things around us in order to give God our time. But in this situation, it was that for the people, God was giving them some rest, but also he was making the Pharaoh and the Egyptians think, oh, they're afraid. They're stopping. They're confused. They don't know what they're doing. This is a good time. Let's go for them. And in doing that, that's how the Egyptians pursued them. And then they ended up going to the Red Sea. And from the Red Sea, the Israelites went through on dry land, and God drowned all of the Egyptians. Spoiler alert, in case you didn't read the story. But the bottom line to this, for me, is something from the book on page 25. Would you rather, when I read this, I have arrows pointing to it everywhere. Would you rather fight your battles armed with human strength, or take a detour through the desert, through the wilderness, through the way of the wilderness, trusting God's intimate presence to insulate you and guide you along the way? So I'm going to say it one more time. Would you rather fight your battles armed with human strength, doing it on our own, doing it with our own self-sufficiency, or take a detour through the desert, trusting God's intimate presence to insulate and guide you along the way. I just want to remind you, and because this really the way this came across to me hit me, the direct route would have led them directly into battle, but the goodness of God led them on a detour on purpose to protect them, because our God is good and our God is gracious. And so this chapter ends with enjoying God's presence means trusting him completely. Woo! And that is where I will bring in that this channel is about perfection being way overrated and progress being where it's at, because living a life of faith, living a life of surrender, sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, and 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and then 10 steps forward. Sometimes growth comes like a bamboo and it just grows really quickly. But the point is, it's the journey, it's the adventure. This is the Imperfect Wellness Adventure channel. And that's because journey is a good word, but to me, adventure is even more, because adventure seems like exciting and purposeful, and that there's something amazing at the end, which I truly believe there is. So, personal truth, enjoying God's presence means trusting him completely. Personal prayer, God, should I ever question your ways or your timing, place a seal on my lips immediately. I don't think God doesn't always do that, but it's a good prayer. I trust your wisdom and your protection and want to follow you wherever you lead me, even through the detours of life. So the question she ends with is, when was the last time God took you on a detour that turned out in your best interests? Again, perfection is overrated. Progress is where it's at. Thank you for coming to this Bible study, this book study and devotional time. Thank you for coming to my channel. If you are enjoying it, please share it with someone. Hit the subscribe bell, and it will remind you, the subscribe and the bell, because it will remind you when my next video comes out. And I'll see you again soon.